In this video, we're going to talk about training grip for soft selection and for just being a capable human in general. The first thing to keep in mind is when you're doing your grip training is that endurance is the most important aspect of that. If you think of when your grip tends to fail you, it's on things like obstacle courses where you might have monkey bars and rope climbs, or you might be carrying a heavy object over and over or for long duration. And as a consequence of focusing on endurance, oftentimes your top end strength will improve even without focusing on that. When you're training your grip, you almost never want to go to failure unless you're doing a exploit phase or you're trying to test what your maximum endurance is like. But if we think of endurance training the same way we do with our lower body, we're oftentimes doing cyclical activities. What I mean by that is that you're working for a little bit, you have a little bit of a rest. So we think of running, it's cyclical in nature where one leg works and then the other leg works. Grip training is obviously a little bit different where you're typically static in nature unless you're climbing something. But in general, we can still train our grip in a cyclical manner, and we can do this by alternating sides with single arm exercises, or we can do a total duration of training volume where we're working for a little bit and then resting for a little bit. In general, the principle here is that we're working at a low percentage of your max output, so you're not lifting or carrying the heaviest thing imaginable. You're oftentimes working at relatively low loads, and then you're working for a little bit, avoiding failure, resting for a little bit, and repeating and building up the total amount of work you can do over time. You should always pair your bilateral grip exercises, things like hangs from a bar or two-arm farmer carries, with other exercises. What I mean by that is you might go from doing your two-arm farmer carries to something like a push-up or a burpee or bear crawls or some other core variation. By doing this, you keep your heart rate elevated, which increases the amount of stress that you're under, which replicates the stress that you're going to be under most of the time in the real world when you're actually stressing your grip. You're rarely ever able to just do something, a carry of some kind, set the weight down, just hang out for a while, and then move on. Oftentimes you're in a hurry. It's paired in a longer exercise like a obstacle course, team events, things like that, where you need to be able to manage your grip in a fatigue state with your heart rate constantly elevated. Some other easy ways to improve your grip is to never use wraps in the gym, ever. Always do things only with the grip that you have. Try to limit the amount of chalk that you're using. Think of earning your chalk if you're doing deadlifts, cleans, whatever it may be. Don't use chalk until you absolutely need to use it. This will help enhance your grip strength over time. The other thing to keep in mind is start with frequency. Grip work, just like endurance stuff, tends to be better to accumulate volume over time. And it's easier to do this by breaking that up in multiple sessions 3 to 4 times throughout the week, as opposed to doing one mega session and being absolutely crushed by it, not being able to use your hands basically for the next 5 days and recovering in time to do the next one. You're much better off breaking that up over 3 to 4 sessions. The last thing you want to keep in mind is that you want to move from general to specific strength work over time. So this means you're going to start off with general things like farmer carries, single arm, two arm, bar hangs, and over time you'll move to more specific exercises like single arm bar hangs, monkey bar circuits, rope climbs, and water jug carries, where they're mimicking the specific types of stressors that you're going to use in your selection course or just real life. The first category of movements that we like to use for developing grip strength and grip endurance are bar hang variations. This includes things like two-arm bar hangs, mixed grip, neutral grip, ring hangs, inverted rows or horizontal bar hangs, and all the variations of those different things. The way we program these tends to be in total volume throughout a workout, somewhere in the 5 to 15 minute range over the course of a workout. Sometimes we structure these where we're saying 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, or whatever the work period is, followed by the same amount of rest, at least a 1-to-1 ratio. Oftentimes with some kind of active work done during those rest periods. So instead of just hanging out, you'd be doing something like push-ups, a crawl variation, some other core exercise, whatever it may be, even mobility work. And the other option, the way we do this, is by just blanket giving a total amount of time that you need to be hanging from the bar over the course of the workout. And this tends to mean pairing that, again, with an accessory movement. So you need to accrue 10 minutes of bar hang time, and every time you drop off the bar, you do something like a push-up or whatever the core exercise or mobility exercise is. Grip exercises that we program are weighted carries. So this is things like two arm and a single arm farmer carry. We tend to do these for either total duration, like we just talked about on our hang series, but also total distance. And this could be anywhere between a quarter mile to a mile in length, depending on whether or not we're doing single arm, two arm. If you're doing the longer distance carries, it needs to be at a very sub-max weight. So that tends to mean you're starting around 25 to 30 pounds in a hand, and maybe over time you work up to about 50 pounds per hand at the absolute heaviest weight. That's assuming that you could handle doing a walk with probably 150 to 200 pounds in each hand if you absolutely had to for a short period of time, that being your like 1 rep max for a farmer carry. And climbing is really the ideal way to build your grip endurance and your grip strength for a variety of reasons. The first being that you're using a lot of different types of grips. You're not just holding static weights at your side with the exact same type of grip over and over and over again. This varies the stress on the tissues throughout your hands and forearms, which is good for avoiding overuse issues and for just developing different types of grip strength, and again, in the tendons and the muscles themselves. There's 3 primary types of programming that we use when programming our climbing training. The first one would be total amount of time climbing. So this tends to mean 3 to 10 minute sets of continuous climbing. To do this, you have to work at a pretty easy climb. It needs to be, this is done with top ropes and something that you can easily do because you can do multiple laps on the same climb. So if it's 5 minutes, that just means you do as many laps on the climb as possible in 5 minutes. And these have to be paired with at least a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio, especially as you extend the duration past 5 minutes. The second one is V-points. So V-points is when you're bouldering. Bouldering routes are graded like V1, V2, and so on and so forth. And we'll set a total V points that you want to accomplish in a workout. So this is a good way to mix bouldering, which is very strength intensive or top end intensity, with a good amount of volume. So oftentimes we'll set somewhere in the 30 to 50 V points in a workout, and you try to get those as quickly as possible. To do this, you have to work at sub-max bouldering problems, meaning if you could climb a V5, you're probably only doing 2s and 3s and maybe a few 4s because you're going from one route to the next to the next. You can't be working at your top end strength. So this is a good way to accrue a good amount of training volume or a good amount of grip work at a relatively high intensity. So we tend to use these sparingly, but it's really good for kind of driving that top end grip strength once you have a foundation of just general capacity. The third method that we'll use are the total amount of routes done. So this tends to be with top roping or lead climbing. This would be the total amount of times you're going up and down on routes throughout a workout. So it could be doing 10 routes throughout a workout or 15 or 20, depending on the intensity or how close to the hardest climb that you're actually working on. So if you're working on easy climbs, the volume is going to be a lot higher. That tends to mean we move towards our volume or timed-based routes. This is kind of an intermediate method where you already have a decent endurance base, or you're just starting climbing and you're not very efficient, and we're just trying to set a baseline for accruing work over time. If you're watching this video, you're probably not a climber, or grip strength or endurance isn't your specialty. It's just another thing that you're considering in your overall training plan. And so if you do a mix of all the things we talked about in this training video, primarily focusing on the amount of volume you're doing, avoiding doing a lot of high intensity stuff, and doing a mix of things at a fairly high frequency, 3 to 4 days per week, just adding these in as finishers or at the end of your workouts, then you'll be able to slowly build up not only the amount of work that you can do in terms of your grip endurance, but your strength will improve as a result. The final thing to consider is having some form of structure in your training. So you don't want to just do more and more of these over time, trying to add volume constantly for infinity. That's a good way to get overuse injuries. Just like all of your training, you want to progressively work up in an intelligent manner. So that tends to mean 10 to 20% of total volume increases week over week. and then every 3 to 6 weeks doing a deload where you drop volume by at least 50% for at least a week, and then you can start building up again. With, again, the max volumes or total amount of work you're doing in any one workout being in that 15 to 20 minute range of total time under tension or working time.